speak at any point, and I will allow that. 3 minutes for each commenter for the public, and I will go ahead and now officially turn it over to Chair Benjamin to officially start tonight's meeting.
Thanks, Bridget. Good evening, everybody. And as Bridget says, welcome to the November 24th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. Courtesy of the Ace Hardware Paint Department, I call this meeting to order. And I would like to begin by having everyone rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
Thank you. And Bridget, could we begin with a roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Polgar.
Here.
Commissioner Holt.
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez.
I am present.
Vice Chair Reddick.
Here.
And Chair Benjamin.
I am virtually here.
All commissioners are present this evening.
Great. The next item of business is consideration of the minutes of November the 10th. I note that Vice Chair had a comment earlier. Does anyone else have any additions or corrections that they would like to make to those minutes? If not, could I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
I move we approve the minutes for November 10th meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Polgar. So moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Polgar.
Yes.
Commissioner Holt.
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Yes.
Vice Chair Reddick.
Yes.
And Chair Benjamin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the time in our meeting when any member of the public who wishes to speak to the Planning Commission on any item other than the items that have been agendized is welcome to do so. So if there is such an interest in speaking, I'm going to go ahead and open the public comment period and invite Bridget to let me know if there are any speakers.
I see none.
Going. The public comment period is closed. So we'll continue with the public hearing items, or item in this case, which is a coastal development permit and tentative parcel map of a subdivision. And I believe that Doug will be handling that item this evening. Welcome, Doug. You're muted, sir.
Hi there. Thank you, Chairman Benjamin, members of the commission. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. If Bridget will let me share the screen, I'll go ahead and put that up.
You should be able to. I haven't blocked anything to.
Okay.
Let me see if it works for you. There you go. There you go.
Okay. This project, it's a 3-lot tentative parcel map located at the corner of Seymour Street and Highway 1. It's partially developed. There's an existing building which was originally a single-family home, then it was converted to a church, and it's recently been converted to back to a residence. One of the things I'd note from this aerial image, there's some discussion of sort of the lot configurations, and part of it is a function of keeping this existing building. It had, as a church, there were parking lots on both sides. Building is where it is, so Instead of a typical 5 or 10-foot side setback, it's more like 50 feet on this side. And that really drives a lot of the lot configuration decisions after that. The lots are fairly large. They could have probably squeezed another lot or two in, but this is what they've chosen. Looking from Seymour, close to the Naomi Patridge Trail, you can see the existing building here in the background. Bulk of the lot is non-native grasses. They've been routinely mowed, pretty limited as far as vegetation, that sort of thing. Eucalyptus trees in the background are all on the properties that front onto Magnolia Street. I believe Planning Commission took a look at some of those along with the city project for the fire truck turnaround recently. We did send out a supplemental memo to the Planning Commission this afternoon. Apologize for not giving you a lot of time on that. So a couple of things have been resolved. In the original staff report, we left the issue of lot retirement a little bit open-ended to give the applicant some time to review their options. They have agreed to participate in the lot retirement program. And so there is a proposed condition of approval in that memo that staff will be recommending be added to the resolution. The other item is more sort of housekeeping. There is a new condition that addresses park fees. Those are required under the subdivision ordinance. So it's mandatory. It's not, probably doesn't really even have to be a condition of approval, but it's a little bit unusual compared to our other development fees. Those are usually paid when somebody applies for a building permit. This one has to be paid prior to recording the final parcel map. So we wanted to get this in just to make sure that the timing was clear. And some comments and questions we got from the Planning Commission. Those are addressed in the memo. Some were pretty routine. Noise seemed to be the most detailed, and that is addressed in detail in the memo. A little bit of background. This project started 2 years ago, maybe more. Initially, it was believed that this was 11 lots based on a 1908 subdivision or map. And the applicants were proposing to do some lot mergers and develop essentially 3 lots. After doing some research on the legality of those lots, determination was made that it's actually 1 lot, almost an acre. And I don't want to get into the arcane details of California subdivision law. Winter's the expert, and if anybody wants to know more, I'm sure she'll be happy to share. So they came up with a new application this year, which is for the current tentative parcel map, 3 lots, so it'll be 2 new lots. Here's just a quick look at the tax assessor's map. This is the area in question. You can see it shows the old lot lines, but they're dashed instead of solid lines. And so that's why, one of the reasons why we started looking into it. The short answer is, if you look at some of these other lots to the west around Magnolia, those lots were conveyed through grant deeds and through sort of a convoluted legal interpretation became legal, whereas this whole property was always conveyed as one property instead of individual lots. A lot going on in this one, so I won't try and get into too much detail. This is the tentative map. Some key features. They will be extending the water line. There's an existing one in Seymour, pretty close to the center line. That will be extended up here to serve the 2 new lots if the map's approved. They have constructed a new sewer easement across 555. This provides sewer access to some of the new houses over on Magnolia Street. It was done cooperatively between all the property owners. It now terminates here. There's a manhole there. If this map is approved, they would then build 2 laterals to serve the 2 new houses. This does show some conceptual footprints for the new buildings. I would note that this is information that would not be recorded with the final map. This is basically for informational purposes to evaluate the full effects of the project. Applicant did, at our request, submit a conceptual site plan along with some additional information concerning the amount of grading, the construction phasing. That was so that we could do a more complete environmental review. In some cases, for a parcel map, you're just looking at the lines on the paper. In this case, building 2 new houses was reasonably foreseeable, and so we wanted to consider that in our evaluation. And so we've used their information for that. Again, this is not a site plan that's going to be approved tonight. This is, again, mostly for informational purposes. So the process, I guess there was some questions about this that we received from the Planning Commission. Our subdivision ordinance requires a tentative parcel map. In some other places, if it's a small subdivision, 4 lots, it's just a parcel map. But our ordinance says it has to be a tentative parcel map. And because under coastal definitions, land subdivision is considered development, so it also requires a coastal development permit. Typically, we think of coastal development permits as being required when somebody's building something. In this case, it's the actual subdivision of the land that triggers it. Environmental review, I believe you received about a 250-page document that goes into some detail on potential environmental effects with biological resource evaluations. And that includes the work that was done on Magnolia Street, which is why it's 250 pages. But that was included to give a complete view of the entire area. And then at the end, if the Planning Commission, those 3 items will be addressed by the Planning Commission tonight. And the Planning Commission can take action on those items. The final map that's required by our subdivision ordinance is more of just a technical review. It's approved by the city engineer / city surveyor. It's not a public hearing. It's required to be consistent with the tentative parcel map. And the review is limited primarily to just making sure that all the legal land descriptions are correct, that the easements are shown, that it's the correct format, that sort of thing. So as part of our review, sort of the first thing we go through with all projects is we look at policy and zoning. The basic designations here, the land use plan, it's residential, medium density, zoning, single family residential, R1, B1. On the most current documents, the coastal land use plan update, this area is not designated as ESHA, environmentally sensitive habitat area. In terms of public services, utilities, those are available. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the addition of 2 houses, as described in the initial study, do not tax existing facilities, police, fire, schools, that sort of thing. As far as the sewer, water, there was an in-depth review by engineering, public works, fire and water districts. I guess I omitted an E in review here. But for environmental review, this one started out because on some projects over on Magnolia Street in previous years, there had been some biological reports that noted a nesting raptor, I believe it was a red-tailed hawk. There's also been some sightings of California red-legged frogs, not on this property, but mostly over in the PD areas. And so we did require a biological resources evaluation. Based on that, that led us into CEQA. And I got into some detail in the staff report, but we reviewed all the potential exemptions, and there are actually larger subdivisions that have been exempted. The Carnoustie Phase 4 was one. In this case, the most likely exemption was what's called the infill exemption. And this project meets all of the requirements except one, which is that the site has to have no potential to support special status species. And I guess no is something subject to interpretation. We took it literally. The applicant did provide a letter from a biologist that had a different interpretation. But after we reviewed all of that, city staff still conservatively said that an initial study should be prepared. So aside from the biological, once you get into CEQA, you look at a pretty broad range of impacts. That includes greenhouse gases and stormwater runoff, utilities, and all of that is well documented in the CEQA document. From the biological report, you can see that the site is pretty much all non-native grasses. In some ways, the Magnolia Street projects that were approved are a little more complex. They have this seasonal drainage ditch between where the houses would go and Magnolia Street. So they have to cross that ditch with driveways. There's also this seasonal drainage ditch along Caltrans, which is adjacent to their properties. So in that sense, Magnolia Street projects were more complex, potentially requiring more outside agency involvement. For this one, on Seymour, the only real ditch is on the other side of Seymour. It's separated by a street with curb and gutter to get into these new lots. There's no drainage ditch. There's no potentially sensitive features to cross or that could be affected through construction. From the land use plan update, it's a little bit hard to read at this scale, but the project site is right here. You can see the corner of Seymour and Highway 1. It's not designated as potential ESHA or ESHA. Once you get over into Wavecrest, this area is designated as potential ESHA due to foraging habitat for birds and a couple of other things. I would note these two red dots were confirmed sightings for California red-legged frog. They're associated with man-made water features. I believe this is an old ag pond out in the middle of Wavecrest. This one over here is part of the Seymour Street stormwater control. There's a man-made basin here where water runs down Seymour and collects there. This is the Seymour Basin. You can see the cul-de-sac at the end of Seymour. Water either just flows down Seymour or down this ditch on the south side, on the Wavecrest side. Then there's a small ditch where it cuts up here into the basin. We were concerned about this because of all the problems with the coastal erosion down by the Seymour ditch a few years ago. And the development on Seymour, I think because it's a little bit newer, actually has pretty good stormwater engineering compared to a lot of other parts of the city. A lot of the runoff that goes into the quote unquote Seymour ditch that starts on the east side of Highway 1 and then crosses near Wavecrest Road, a lot of the the watershed for that is uphill on the east side. The water gets a pretty good head coming down. Also, if you look, this is a large drainage ditch coming off Magnolia side that eventually flows over towards Seymour Ditch and the coast. The Seymour Street Basin, it does have an outflow here. And walking around down there, it doesn't look like it gets a lot of, it's fairly high elevation, so it takes quite a bit of water for it to come out. The actual ditch here, you can pretty much step across if you have long legs. So this was all reviewed by Engineering Public Works, determined that the stormwater issues were, by adding these two houses with their impermeable surface, were not a big issue. Just a quick shot of the Seymour Basin. You can see probably has some interesting habitat value. When I was out there, there were a couple of wet spots, but didn't appear to have year-round water. So it's not a biologist, but probably not the greatest breeding habitat for frogs, but certainly would have some value. We do mention a culvert and a basin near the existing building. When they built the parking lots around the church, they had to put in these improvements because of the increase in impermeable surface. For the two new lots, they're pretty big. We are requiring that they meet a 10-year storm event, 2-hour duration. As individual projects, they wouldn't trigger that because of the amount of impermeable surface increase doesn't trigger it, but because it was a parcel map, we are requiring that more stringent standard. And you can see this is the culvert comes through probably right around here, dumps into this ditch next to Wave Crest. And you can see the curb and gutter that goes all the way up to Highway 1 essentially. And then when you get past the property, the curb and gutter stops and some of the water just eventually sheets or perks into this ditch. Looking down to the west, some of these trees were planted. You can see as landscaping, they still have the stakes supporting them. As far as vegetation in the ditch, it's pretty sparse. That may be in part due to maintenance, I'm not sure, but doesn't have the lush kind of vegetation you would think of as being riparian or that sort of thing. And sort of other issues that came up in the comments, noise, as I mentioned, was kind of the big one. And I'd make it clear from a CEQA standpoint, in this case, it's not an environmental impact. The noise being the effect on traffic on Highway 1 on the future homes. There's been a number of court decisions as well as direction from the state that makes it clear that environmental impacts are the effect of the project on the environment, not the environment on the project. So it's more of a general plan policy consistency question. In our general plan noise element, we do have some standards which are more restrictive than what you would typically find. 40 decibel CNL for interior and 60 for certain areas of exterior yard. 45 and 65 would be the more common. So under our general plan policy, it requires that a noise study be conducted if you're within certain noise contours from Highway 1 and provides those standards of the 40 and 60 decibel. In reviewing the city's sound contour maps, it's pretty difficult to make a definitive judgment just based on the quality of the mapping and the scale, but most likely, if there is a new home built in the lot closest to the highway, it would probably fall in the 65 to 75 decibel range. For interior standards, One thing in California is because of all the Title 24 requirements in the California Building Code, houses have to meet. It's not necessarily intended for noise, but by the time they put in all the insulation and double pane windows, they're probably there. There is also, in consulting with the city's building official, in the California Building Code, there is a noise standard for habitable space, and it requires construction that can absorb, reflect 45 decibels. There are some exemptions for residential, so it's not necessarily mandatory for this, but there are many examples of achieving this 40 decibels level through essentially the level of construction that's required in California anyway. To get it down to 40 decibels, what we've seen with other projects, it's maybe a little bit better windows, siding, that's insulation, that sort of thing. Just as an aside, I've done an extended stay hotel that was on a direct flight path to a major airport with 24/7 air flights. And we did a noise study and we made them put in triple pane windows and some insulation, and it's fine. It's still there and no problems. So it's not really heroic effort to meet those standards. For the exterior, it's limited to areas like a patio or a deck. It's not for the entire property. And again, that's something that when the sound study is done, they'll look at the actual designs for the building, and using the structure of the house, fences, they should be able to attain that level for those areas. Pretty straightforward. But again, that's a condition of approval. They have to have the noise study prepared, and it has to demonstrate that they can meet these standards before they would get a permit to build. In terms of other miscellaneous issues, this area is visually, it's within 200 yards of Highway 1. Any future development would be required to meet visual standards along Highway 1. That would include putting up story poles, architectural design review, that sort of thing. So that concludes my presentation. Staff recommendation is to adopt the initial study, mitigated negative declaration, and then approve the tentative parcel map and coastal development permit with the 2 additional conditions proposed in the supplemental memo.
Okay, thank you very much, Doug. Colleagues, this would be the time to ask clarifying questions of the project. I'm still looking at the presentation. I've got to figure out how to get you all back up. Thank you, magic. So do any of you, would any of you like to ask some clarifying questions with respect to this project? Yes, Sarah.
All right. Can folks hear me now? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So sorry, I was having problems with connection. So my question was about relating to I saw in the ISMND and the analysis with respect to the agriculture, and it totally makes sense. And I don't have any issues with that. I just was curious as to how, with our new land use plan, we have the in the ag section, there's a right to ag policy. Now we don't have an ordinance, and that hasn't passed and everything like that. But I wanted to understand, if that's because that is something that can happen. Based on my understanding, where houses go in next to existing ag, and then there's complaints about the ag operation doing its, at business as usual, which is they're allowed to do, and to make sure that it's clear, so there isn't a conflict down the road. I don't know that I don't think there's anything that would change in terms of the analysis or review about this parcel map. It's not with respect perhaps to this discussion. It's more just clarifying, kind of looking down the road, how might this be incorporated or avoided in terms of an issue, especially considering we don't necessarily have the right to ag ordinance or anything on the books yet. Just that asking kind of that looking down the road when there is a building.
Great question. What's your take?
I'm going to defer to new land use plan questions to Jill because she knows it inside out.
Well, thank you, Chair Benjamin. Chair Benjamin and the commission know it inside out as well, which is fabulous. So in this case, I think Commissioner Polder, you would be able to apply some kind of condition on the coastal development permit for the house that follows. It's a little awkward right now to have such a condition on the parcel map. A deed restriction is sort of what we were looking for in the land use plan policy. Of course, this policy it's adopted by your city council, but it is not yet certified by the Coastal Commission. That said, there are Coastal Act policies that would also support you in considering this for future development. So we can look into that more when the houses come back, and we don't know what the status of your land use plan will be at that point in time, and we can have a crisper answer on the intent there. But we'll certainly talk to the applicant about it, and we understand what you're bringing up, and we appreciate that.
Anything else, Commissioner Polgar? Anybody else? I see movement from Brian, but I don't think it's a hand.
No, I've got no comments. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Reddick, did I see you raise your hand?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, and I'll start with a follow-up on Sarah's question, which was, as I understand it, this is an existing R1B1 lot with development on it, and this subdivision is entirely discretionary, right? So as long as there's a nexus to the proposed development, if I'm not suggesting we've reached that conclusion, if we thought there ought to be a right to farm condition, somehow it would be okay to attach it. Maybe it would be something here as a placeholder for when the houses are constructed, or maybe something associated. I'm not exactly sure the form. I guess I'm just trying to figure out why this would be a bad time and the construction of the house would be a good time. Because in the past, when we get a single family residence, a lot of our flexibility to address things have disappeared because of exemptions. Whereas here with the subdivision, we have, I think, more flexibility to add this kind of condition. That would have been my naive grasp, independent of the new LCP, just with respect to the existing LCP and when conditions can be applied to a discretionary permit without a single family residence exemption.
I'm happy to jump in on this
Please.
one as well. Yeah, I mean, I think that the sort of nexus for any condition would be, do you need it to support the findings that you would make in approving the permit? And here you're making consistency findings with the existing local coastal program, Coastal Act, zoning code, etc. So, I think I would look there for a place to put the condition as sort of supportive of those findings. It does not seem to me like this is so much of a CEQA issue, which is where you can get into, if there's a CEQA exemption down the road, it might not be a mitigation measure, but I think you will have the same CDP findings that you're going to need to make when when the houses come in. So
Got it.
I think you're going to have the same opportunities for making those consistency findings for either CDP. And so you'll have the same kind of leeway to add that condition either now or in the future. And I think my understanding of Jill's comments is right now, they're not proposing to put more people on the property who might be unhappy with the neighboring farming. That is going to happen when the housing projects come forward.
I think I get it now. Thank you. Yeah, with respect to some of the other subdivisions that we've recently had to deal with, we found that there was some difficulty with some of the conditions that we might have liked to put in. So you and Jill have helped clarify that for me. So thank you both for that. There was a comment about service entries all being underground. I was just looking at Seymour itself, and I see they've got power lines going down Seymour, and I assume that LCP policy 7-4, the one that says in new development, we're going to do undergrounding. I don't remember the exact words, but there's not an opportunity to make these power lines disappear, right? They're here, and that's the way it is.
Primarily, what we've been requiring when we get to new construction is that everything has to be undergrounded, basically to the extent we can. So in some cases, that's from the nearest utility pole to the house. In other cases, we've been able to say you have to underground it along that street frontage for the project, but certainly not for all of Seymour Street.
Got it. Got it. I just, in a perfect world, it would be nice to, those poles do kind of present themselves as you're driving down the road if you follow my meaning, and it is adjacent to a pretty scenic location. Well, it's on Highway 1, so that there's a whole conversation about that that's separate. Okay. Then a question about, and at this point, I think it's hypothetical, but I appreciate the comment about the project not presenting a noise impact, because of course it would be, if you like, the sensitive receptor that would experience the noise rather than the producer of the noise, except for the minimal construction stuff. I was looking at the sound ordinance and I noticed that it had language that said, our general plan thinks it's sound barriers in the event that mitigations of impacts can't be achieved otherwise. And one of the consequences of the subdivision is that we're creating development entitlements on lots that are closer than what's, well, beyond the existing structures. And so I wonder what we can say, or do we need to say, if we think that those noise element issues in policy 2 of our noise element are not things that we would like to see used as a mechanism to achieve compliance with a noise ordinance, after we've done the subdivision, and then we're presented with something that doesn't really work without them. Does the question make sense?
I understand the question, I think. And I think if you read through the policies in the noise element, and it is showing its age, a lot of that was written, I think, in the late 80s, 90s. And they do say, well, yeah, you just build sound walls. And I think the answer is that when these projects come in for a coastal development permit to build a house, part of that review is going to be, it's within 200 yards of Highway 1. We have to look at that as a visual resource. And if the project had, if they proposed putting in a, 20-foot high concrete sound wall, we would take a hard look at that in the architectural review and in the findings for the coastal development permit. And it's a little bit speculative on my part, but I think we would say you probably need to just take the windows out of that side of the house and put in some more insulation would probably be the way forward. Again, it's a little speculative at this point, but
Yeah,
that
I
would be my
realize we
take.
don't have a design. I just wondered if, and again, the commission may be okay with that option of sound wall being on the table. I'm not presuming. But if the commission were concerned, could we impose a condition on the subdivision that takes those off the table?
I'll defer to the legal mind on this one.
Exactly. What do you think, Winter?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would want to take a look at the existing land use policies. I'd be a little bit concerned about ruling out altogether a policy that, or a measure that, even if outdated, is recommended in the plan. So I think I would want to take a look at that before we ruled it out at this point. But I think, Doug's point on the sort of practical level is you're going to have some flexibility in determining how these policies of visual resource and noise reduction mesh. And my understanding from reading the staff report and the updated memo is that there are opportunities for handling the outdoor noise short of a sound wall in this location, and that would be part of the process for any application for a CDP for an individual house on that closest to the highway lot. But Doug, correct me if I misstated any of that.
That makes sense to me.
Okay. So let's see. In the staff report, there was a brief conversation about lot retirement. And I realize now that the applicant is offering lot retirement. So maybe that section of the staff report is moot. But since
it is.
It's material. Okay, good.
That's addressed in the supplemental memo that we sent you. And I don't know if everybody's had time to read that because we didn't
I
get
may
it
have
to you
read
until
it too
fairly late.
fast.
But it has the but it has two conditions, one for the lot line, the lot retirement, and one for the park dedication fees. If the commission wants to approve the project, staff recommendation would be to include those two conditions as part of the approval.
So Mike, yeah, I did get the conditions. I was just trying to focus on the evidence or the findings in support of the conditions. And I understand that the applicant is willing. Maybe that's enough of a finding, I don't know. But in the staff report, the conversation was about these particular homes having kind of minimal impact. I think you know the section of the report I'm talking about. My grasp of the way that the lot retirement activity was presented in Pacific Ridge was about the cumulative impact of all of the development that was taking place. And I just wanted to understand whether the report is sufficient as it stands, which is fine if it is, or if we need something different in order to communicate that. And I see the director stepping up.
Thank you, Chair Benjamin. We were hanging our hat on the land use plan policy although it's not yet certified by the Coastal Commission, the City Council's adoption of the land use plan and policy 2-22 with regards to lot retirement, 2-21 with respect to lot retirement identifies cumulative impacts and really held together the purpose for requiring this. And so that was where we were identifying that this was really now a city policy from the perspective of council having reviewed it through that land use plan adoption hearing process. And that furthermore, that this policy is consistent with what the Coastal Commission has imposed upon any Half Moon Bay subdivision project that they found in their purview because of appeals or other reasons for it to have been brought up to their to their level. So we thought we covered it there. If you want it to be more overt as you're discussing this later, we can do that, but that's where it came from.
Yeah, if staff, of course, the other commissioners may feel the same differently. I actually didn't have so much an opinion that it needed to change. I just wanted to make sure that the condition wasn't vulnerable to a challenge because it lacked evidence in support of the findings that it was needed. So that's really the only reason I'm asking this question.
And I would just add, I don't think it's vulnerable. And in particular, when the applicant has gone on the record agreeing to it, there's virtually no chance of opposition to it at that point. Also, given that the Coastal Commission, which is the only other entity I could imagine that would kind of have the ability to complain about any of our conditions, would likely have imposed the same condition themselves. So I think we're safe on that front.
Okay, very good.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Oh yes, Commissioner Hernandez, thank you.
Okay, so I just, since we're looking at the policies adopted by the City Council, even though the LUP hasn't been adopted, hasn't been certified yet, I want to go back to Sarah's, Commissioner Polgar's original question. If the applicant were willing to be supportive or accept a condition of approval that says, look, we're not gonna worry about the farmers, that we know the farmers are there, they have a right to operate within the regulations of the city. We're going to follow the policies within the new LUP that we've adopted as a policy, similar to what we've done for lot retirement. Is there any issue with us attaching a similar condition of approval with respect to protecting the farming rights in the property next door? Or maybe that question's for Winter.
Yeah, as I think I mentioned in response to Chair Benjamin's question, I think the commission could adopt a condition like that either now or in the future, because you are being asked to make consistency findings with the Coastal Act in particular. We do need to be a little bit careful about the new LCP policies. I think they support the lot retirement condition, as Jill was saying, but they're not actually certified yet. But there are plenty of policies and provisions in the Coastal Act to protect agriculture. And if you are being asked to make a finding that this project would be consistent with those policies, I think that you could add a condition. It just might make a little bit more logical sense to do it when there's actually a proposal to develop the residence there. Since that's going to be when the human inhabitants are closer to being on the site. But I think the commission could support it now or in the future.
Okay, great. And you have no concern about maybe piecemealing is not the right word because that's a little loaded, but my concern is having inconsistent policies applied as these projects come forward in the future. So I would like to see, especially because there's an existing residence that's already been approved, we would be within our right. Two questions. First question is, do you see a concern with the policies being applied inconsistently in the future? And the second question is, just to restate what I think I heard you say, there is no issue with us applying this condition now, as long as we reference it as a Coastal Act priority versus something coming from the city's policies. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair restatement. I'm not concerned about inconsistent application in the future because this body and the planning department is going to be processing the permits as they come forward. So, who knows? I guess we could hypothetically have an application 50 years in the future, and then folks might not remember. But I think in general, I think this body has a pretty good institutional memory, so I'm not so concerned about that.
We have a better memory now than we did when I first started. So I worry about how long that memory is going to last. But okay, thank you. I had two other questions. One is, this is a visual resource area, given its proximity to Highway 1. I would just like city staff to comment on the visual resource area, just for the people viewing at home, so they can, so that the lay people who can't read through all of these documents understand that how city staff have looked at this as a visual resource, and any findings and recommendations they have about a visual resource.
The way we've dealt with this on projects I'm familiar with is we typically require they put up story poles so people can see what it would look like as far as the massing and the scale. And, you know, Highway 1, some of that really depends on where you are. We have very specific policies about protecting broad ocean views, the hillsides to the east. It recognizes the views along Highway 1 corridor as important, but it's much less specific than it is for some other features like the ocean. So in this case, you know, part of our review was that you can't see the ocean from there, from Highway 1. It's on the west side of the highway, so it doesn't affect views of the hillsides. So it's more, a little bit more of a grayer area. Is it just consistent with the style of Half Moon Bay? As far as the materials, the scale, the massing, like I said, there are some standards that are really strict along Highway 1, some that are a little more less clear. So on this one, I think we'd be looking at putting up see the design, the materials. A couple of factors. One is that these are big lots. They could have probably squeezed another couple of lots in there. This spreads out the development a little bit with a total of 3 houses versus what could have been maybe 5. I think that does have a good effect as far as just the aesthetics of, you know, somebody going down the Naomi Patridge Trail or along Highway 1, that it's not just a big, you know, massive block of building looming up there. So that's just all part of the architectural design review process that we go through. Like I said, some areas get a little more attention than others. Anything that close to Highway 1 gets quite a bit of scrutiny.
My concern is, and this is the more direct question, Seymour is one of the most consistent streets in Half Moon Bay from a development perspective. If you look at the style of homes, the mass, the scaling of the homes. And if we had something similar to the existing structure on lot 13 and 14 at 555 Seymour, I don't think you'd have a lot of concerns, even though it's a pretty substantial property. My concern is that if you have a massive structure on this site, you'd be obstructing open ocean views, and you'd be hampering, it wouldn't conform to the neighboring community. So in the future, when these individual projects come to us, I guess my question is, we would be within our rights to ask, as part of architectural review, that the applicant be consistent with either the neighboring property or not have something that stands too proud in that location, given its proximity as an open ocean view. And, you know, we don't want something that would be wildly out of line with this very uniform neighborhood. We'd be within our rights to push back if the applicant decided to create a behemoth property here. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I know the Planning Commission doesn't see a lot of just individual house applications. They're usually approved by the Community Development Director. But when you read through the the reports and the findings for those CDPs for a single home. They're pretty extensive findings that get into compatibility with the neighborhood as far as materials, the size of the buildings, that sort of thing. So that would be a pretty routine part of our review. We do have some single family residential guidelines that encourage diversity in neighborhoods, but the overriding theme is that it all works together.
Yeah. Okay, great. And this is, unless they're asking for a variance, this is something that would be ministerial in nature by approval. So I guess my only concern is just making sure this isn't out of scale or scope. And I think, you guys are already looking at those types of things. The third thing I have, which is
Rick,
really,
Rick,
yep.
excuse me, just as a point of order, I want to give Winter a chance to comment on the ministerial.
Yeah, it won't be ministerial. Everything in Half Moon Bay needs a CDP, which is
Sorry.
discretionary.
Okay.
So.
Sorry.
And just a little extra on that. The threshold of review for what the director would review as opposed to bringing something up to the commission. In the single family business, I'm in the ADU business. It's pretty much an ADU shop. If we have single family homes that are in a visual resource area, in most cases we're going to bring them to the commission, especially if we have a sense of your concern about a particular location. And we're already hearing a little bit of that here, even though we're in clarifying questions, I believe, still. So just we can talk more about those thresholds, but that would be what you'd expect here.
Okay, great. And then the third thing, which is probably for future development, is given the proximity to Highway 1, and I don't think we covered this during the previous project. I know one of my colleagues on the commission here has some expertise in water quality runoff from Highway 1. When we finish these homes, what's the thinking around bioswales or other protective measures to keep all the various runoff from, contaminating parcel C, parcel B in the future? And do we have anything to hold the city harmless if there is a problem from Caltrans in the future?
I'll jump in on the last question, which is that we do have a standard condition of approval that indemnifies the city from any harm that might come to an applicant from the city's approval of the application. So we're consistently covered on that. And I don't know if Doug, you have thoughts on the design, the bioswale design question.
Our focus was more on water leaving these properties than water going to the properties. So Seymour does have curb and gutter along both sides adjacent to this. So any water that's coming off of Highway 1 there just flows down Seymour, not onto these properties. In terms of, if you look at from the edge of pavement on Highway 1 to the closest property line, it's not a parallel, but I think at the closest point, it's probably like 85 feet or so to the property line, and there's the Naomi Patridge Trail. Water sheet flowing off of the highway, I think is for the most part, and I'm kind of shooting from the hip here, it's going to accumulate at the toe of the berm that Highway 1's on. It's really not just going to be gushing over onto somebody's front lawn for the most part, I wouldn't think. But again, that's not something we really analyzed in depth.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. maybe I'll take a minute and pile on to Rick's earlier questions about visual resources, because I appreciate that we're recognizing this is within the 200 yards of Highway 1, and in that sense, it's pretty clearly a visual resource. I was looking at our LCP, our existing certified LCP, and noting that we've adopted Coastal Act 30251. It says that permitted development is supposed to be sited and designed to protect views to and along the ocean and scenic coastal areas. That strikes me as and I looked for a definition of scenic coastal areas. I'm not sure that's a defined term in our LCP. And so I'm thinking that another perspective on this is the proximity to the North Wavecrest area, which I'm looking at on Google Earth right now. And it is quite beautiful. I'm not sure I can see the ocean from here. The picture may not be that good, but it is surely a scenic coastal area unless there's some very narrow definition that would exclude it. Any thoughts?
My only thought is, again, here where it's a little bit challenging because there's no proposed buildings along with this. It's a straight subdivision. So again, I think that when there is a proposal and a CDP application for an actual residence, then there will be, architectural design review. There will be a consistency determination with existing LCP policies, municipal code policies and provisions about scenic resources when you actually have the building there. And I believe that there will be story poles required for these developments if and when they're proposed. But Doug and Jill, again, correct me if I get that wrong.
Yeah, I definitely want to give Jill a chance to weigh in on that. And my goal here is not to, I don't know if we'll be in the same condition once a lot has been established than we are today. That's why it seems pertinent to me at this point. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Ekus. No?
I didn't have anything there. I just wanted to confirm that story poles are required for, I believe, for both of the lots because they would both, in addition to everything west, or excuse me, east of the home that's there now, would be within 200 yards of Highway 1.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have clarifying questions? I know we've covered a lot and people did a nice job of not kind of applying values to the project. I think it was abstract if you could sort of get an idea what people might think. I appreciate the effort there. In that case, I think it's time for us to open the public hearing. So the public hearing on this item is now open. And Bridget, do we have anyone who would like to speak on the item?
We do. Mike Ferreira would like to speak.
All right, please put him on.
Mike, you're on.
Welcome, Mike.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. Actually, the reason I am attending tonight and commenting is because I had some of the same concerns that were being expressed in the questions that I've heard. I do think we need to seriously think about the view corridor. I want to, and I'm glad that there was some discussion about the right to farm. It's timely because just this year, the contract farmer on that parcel quit because of complaints from people living on that street. And that's being handled now by some other contract farmer just on a cleanup basis. There's no current lease there. Back to the view thing, I had the impression from the first staff report that the view was being considered at 90 degrees, but I'm glad to see that I'm confused by what's in front. Okay, that's the timer. I'm glad to see that there is discussion about it. I do want to reiterate something I've said before, which is that the sound wall in Ocean Colony was not Ocean Colony's idea. A judge put it there because the houses were too close to the highway and the noise was a danger to human health. That's because there was a lawsuit. And it wasn't for the interior of the houses, it was for the backyards. So to some degree, what we're about to do tonight is to create a lot that's in that zone where people on the outside in their yard would be exposed to noise and might well have a right to a sound wall. An 11-foot sound wall there would be quite an intrusion, not just from the highway, but from the parallel trail. So I would also like to add that if that second lot were not being created, it would obviate lot retirement because the Coastal Commission doesn't do lot retirement on a simple one addition lot. You could get away from it altogether if he just did one lot. So it would be nice if we didn't have that second lot. I don't know what the feeling of the commission is, but I'm afraid that creating that second lot will inevitably create a visual impact. Thank you.
You're on mute, Jimmy.
Thank you,
There you go.
Mike. Who else would like to speak? Bridget, I assume the applicant would like to address us at some point, or they certainly are welcome.
Yeah, they're the only three others that are on, so I don't know if they wish to speak. No one's raising their hand.
Okay. In that case, I hope they'll be available. Oh.
I believe the applicant would like to speak. Let me just allow Adrian to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you very much. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Adrian Schnell. I live in Half Moon Bay and I'm the applicant representative for Coastside Estates. And this is made up of 3 members, 2 of which live in Half Moon Bay, and the other one is hoping to have a house here one day. So from the standpoint of answering some of your questions, if you want me to do that, I can. I can tell you that when this was first purchased, I took a picture of every single house on Seymour Street because I'm responsible for doing architectural plans. And so the concept would be to make it consistent with the neighborhood, which is essentially what I think of like a Hampton, Cape Cod type of neighborhood. So I want to assure you that we would be consistent with everything on that block. If anything, the church, of course, was not consistent with that. So we're trying to make that look a little bit better. And then as far as, I'm trying to think some of your other questions. This whole thing as far as the ag, I wasn't aware that there were that many complaints or problems. Typically, in my mind, that would be something that would be a real estate disclosure too, from the standpoint of that would have to be included in the real estate disclosures. I think we're far enough away by having 85 feet from the highway to the side of the property, and I will be making sure that Mr. Chair Benjamin, all your concerns as far as the sound, that I look at the design and I've revamped that so we can address that and have a better situation for the homeowners in the backyard, etc., to be further away from that. Trying to think, are there any other questions as far as, that I can answer? Well, I can answer the fire hydrant that I saw in the extra thing. The fire hydrant is actually on the tentative parcel map. It's very small. It's in the left-hand furthermost corner, which would be the southwest, and it's noted as FH, very small. It's within 500 feet of the last house. I think it's the whole lot area is 256. So we've complied. And Deputy Fire Marshal John Rydell gave a letter of that certification to CCWD for us. Are there any other questions that I may answer?
If you would, perhaps we could leave the public hearing open, and as the commission deliberates on the thing, if something comes up, perhaps we can ask you then. Would that be all right?
That's certainly fine. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Bridget, is there anyone else who would like to speak to us on this item tonight?
I see none.
All right. Having said I was going to leave the public hearing open, I guess I should, because that's the only way I can get feedback from the applicant in response that I can think of. So I'm going to bring it back to the commission for the time being, and at some point find out what you would like to ask the applicant. And when we finish getting that stuff out, then I will close the public hearing proper, if that seems like an appropriate way to do this.
Sure. I mean, we might want, well, I'm not the procedural guy, but no, I just had a couple of questions, if it's okay, Jimmy, through the chair.
Please, please.
So I was unaware of the litigation involving Ocean Colony and sound walls. Since the time I've been on the Planning Commission, we've had a few questions about whether or not we should put a sound wall on properties along Highway 1. And we've, I think at least 2, maybe 3 projects, we've rejected that. We have created a recent recent item. It was the Poplar Street and Highway 1 project on that corner there, where we rejected a sound wall because we were advised that through architectural design, the sound quality issues would be addressed. I do think it's worthwhile when these projects come back to us to think about what's the impact of sound in backyards. I think that's worth considering. We hadn't really considered that as much as the sound quality inside the houses, but that's my experience in the time I've been on the Planning Commission, is that we haven't been fans of sound walls, and want to make sure that anything we do is consistent unless we have overwhelming evidence that we need to put a sound wall in place. I'd like to see something pretty strong in order for us to make that change. I'm pleased with the fact that the applicant says they want to make the future houses consistent with the existing neighborhood. I think that that's really good. I would like to see a condition of approval that addresses the right to farm. I think it's unconscionable that people get these awesome houses in a great location right next to farm property, which gives them the awesome view, and then they complain about the farms right next to them. It's I have my cake, now I want yours too, right? So I'm concerned about giving more people the right to complain and drive off our farmers. So those are the only and by the way, I'm supportive of this effort. I mean, a lot of homework's gone into this, other than the items I've already raised around visual resources, right to farm, and so forth. I think that and consistent with the neighborhood, I'm supportive of this project and approval moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Who else would like to discuss their points of view on this project? Don't everyone speak up at once. Are there questions for the applicant? Yes,
Chair Benjamin.
Chair Reddick.
I don't have questions for the applicant, but just a couple of comments. I wanted to give kudos to staff for the conservative approach that was taken to this project regarding special status species and going down the path of doing the initial study. I know that made it a much more cumbersome thing, but I have no doubt that that was the right decision in this case. I'm happy to see the new detail in the late breaking memo this afternoon with the lot retirement and park fees language. Yeah, the noise, the question of noise does worry me, and former Mayor Ferrara's comments about the Ocean Colony situation concerned me. I would certainly hope that we don't go down a path that when the proposals for two houses on those two lots come forward, that we could end up in a situation where a sound wall is required. I think rather sitting here today, take the current staff report and the provisions, the conditions of A7 about noise as a reason to be optimistic that other methods would be found to protect the quality of the environment noise-wise in portions of the backyards and in the interior of the houses. And if that proved to be impossible, which seems really unlikely, that we wouldn't go forward with something that doesn't meet the noise requirements. And I'm certainly supportive of the concept of assuring that future residents in this area are aware of and don't complain about farming south of Seymour Street. I agree with Commissioner Hernandez that that's a little bit ridiculous to move in there and seek to stop the farmer from farming the land across the street. Not that the current applicants, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on the current applicants by any means, but I think at this point, or when the future CDPs happen, I would certainly support the right to farm language in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Polgar, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Well, did you want?
Sorry.
Go ahead. We muted, so I think you can talk now.
Sorry about that. So I wanted to see did we want to hear from the applicant in response to Rick's, Commissioner Hernandez's questions before further discussion?
I think that would be fine. Maybe Rick, you can outline the questions again for the applicant so that she has a chance to address them more precisely.
I guess for the applicant, does the applicant have any objection to us attaching a condition of approval tonight for a right to farm policies being applied to this project? That's the only question I think is specifically for the applicant right now.
You can speak, Adrian.
Speak? All right.
Yeah.
You can hear me. So I'm not certain as far as the wording of this or legality. So I would like to see that. And again, I could talk to the managing partner. I don't think it should be a problem, but it's very difficult to say, not understanding what the clause would say or if it would be a condition of approval. Maybe Jill can tell me, or Ms. King, as far as what that terminology would say.
I wonder if Jill, you'd like to address this, or would a 5-minute, break at some point to have that dialogue as a sidebar be better for you? How would you like to proceed? Maybe it's better here too.
We'll have, we're going to need a break to talk about it. What I'm trying to do right now is recall the most current best example that we have of this, and it may be at the Matucci PD. Doug is nodding, so I'm going to go. I recommend you carry on, and I will spend a little time trying to find that.
Through the chair, maybe we could finish the rest of the comments from the Planning Commission.
You're on mute, Jim.
Sorry, I was just me trying to end the reverb from Commissioner Polgar. Commissioner Polgar, did you have some other questions while we were waiting on that one?
I don't have questions for the applicant. I think that if you want my comments, I can chime in at this point with a couple comments. Is that yes or no? Okay, so I am concerned about the issue of the sound, and that we may be setting ourselves up for a situation where a sound wall kind of it becomes the kind of, oh, this is what is needed to comply. I'm not, and I do agree that that would not be very compatible in many ways in that area. So I am concerned about that. And in looking at the resolution, the sound level A7, the sound level safety, I'm not sure that that quite directs away from the approach of using a sound wall. So I wonder if there's a way to maybe better reflect what Vice Chair Ruddock was saying about how really making sure that the design is exhausting essentially all options for addressing the exterior noise without using a sound wall, or because I don't want to see us put kind of in a corner later on. My thought on the right to farm is it's something I think is very important, but I heard a couple times from Winter that whether we include something now versus later at the point of when the house would be a CDP for the actual construction of a house, that isn't won't necessarily, that's not a big deal essentially. So I if it's a matter of like approving this, moving forward with this without that in this, I don't know that I'm worried about that, because I see that in the process of the CDP approval for the actual houses that would be would have to be a consideration. But I don't want to let that go though. Certainly if that's not the case, if I have that wrong, then let me know, because I brought it up in the first place because it's important. I think it's really important. And then I think those are the only two things that I wanted to kind of reflect back in terms of I like that I think this is a appropriate project and everything in general. It's really just those issues, those two things. So those are my comments.
Thank you. I'll want to join in where you left off after I've heard from the rest of the commission. Brian, Commissioner Holt, did you have thoughts?
Got nothing further to add. I appreciate all the points that have been raised, and generally in support of everything that's been said. So I don't think I have anything substantive to really add of value. So thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting. I have a disembodied head next to the beautiful trees. That's it adds extra attention to what you're saying. I should learn how to use those backgrounds. So just to piggyback on some of the concerns that I heard from Commissioner Polgar and Commissioner Hernandez, I was reading through the rest of the noise ordinance, and I understood counsel, the deputy city attorney, when she said she wanted to think a little bit about it before saying that we wanted to have a condition that took sound walls off the table. And if we need time for that, that's okay. A guitar teacher once taught me that speed is the byproduct of accuracy. So I'm willing to find the time if that will help clarify this. I noticed that in the noise ordinance, one of the implementing actions for implementing the thing is to set back houses further from, there's a specific set of implementing actions with respect to mitigating noise impacts in the transportation corridor. This is implementing action 1 for policy, I think it's policy 1, maybe, but it basically says set the house back as, far from the road. But there is that policy 2, 2A, I believe it is, that sound walls can be implemented. And I suppose that was probably the basis for the lawsuit. Or maybe this was a byproduct of that. I don't have the history. Maybe if it's material, the public hearing is still open and the number of speakers is small. So perhaps we could invite Mr. Ferrer to give us more history. But I do worry that once we've completed the subdivision, that if the project can't be cured by reducing size, essentially that if it can't be cured without a sound wall, that we will be in a position where we will be having to look at one, and literally and figuratively. And that's not something I think is in our interests. So I'm looking for ways to take that off the table, as you said. So perhaps in the interim, during our brief recess, we can talk about what might be feasible there to address. I appreciate the applicant's willingness also to proceed with a lot retirement. I think that's entirely great. And I appreciate her pointing out the fire hydrant. I absolutely did miss it. And I understood the condition that says that we will get a professional registered engineer's audiology report. Would that report essentially say that it's conforming with our, I just want to be sure I know what the standard is. I wouldn't want to be happy if I got a report that said, this is the project and it doesn't conform. So I'm wondering if the condition should be saying that the project, he's certifying that the project is designed to meet the needs of, to meet the requirements of our noise element. And I assume that's the case, but the language just said we were getting a report. So I'm just trying to sharpen it up a little bit if it seems desirable. I think the nexus between sound and sound wall and visual resources is one that ought to be, we ought to find a way to draw the lines and the conditions, that perhaps the satisfaction of the noise element shouldn't come at the expense of visual impacts. And noting that the noise element actually includes a policy that says a project can be rejected for not conforming. So finding a way to put those pieces together to get the results that I truly believe the applicant wants, and avoid us being in the position of saying, well, what the applicant wants turns out not to be as feasible as we thought. But at that point, we're looking at single family residences that have entitlements that they don't have at the moment. That's what I'm struggling with on this project right now. I appreciated Commissioner Hernandez's concern about the pollutants. I sort of was heading in the direction that Doug did with respect to whether the pollutants from the highway would wash onto the property. On the other hand, they shouldn't be washing into Seymour either. But that's not the applicant's problem, that's Caltrans' problem. If there's pollutants on the applicant's property, that shouldn't be washing out. Everybody wins if there are bioswales. So I'm hopeful that whatever designs come forward will maximize that kind of filtration. And maybe that, I don't know if that needs to come up now or whether that's something that is more associated with the homes when they're actually proposed. I do believe that Coastal Act 30251 provides you additional vehicle. Maybe you'll find a sensitive coastal resource, scenic coastal resource definition. I didn't. And I think it's broad enough that it might provide you with some additional coverage beyond some of the other specifics in the visual resources chapter of the LCP as well as 1837. I do think proximity to the PDD, the incredibly beautiful wave crest area, does make it a significant resource and worthy of attention in the design of this project. Certainly when the houses come. But if there's something we can do now that gives us that protection then, as opposed to finding ourselves finding opportunities to implement those kind of protections foreclosed because there's an entitlement that doesn't exist today. That's the concern. I don't think I have too much more to add to that. I really appreciate the attention that I think everybody's on the same page in terms of what we want to do. This is, I think we have general agreement about what the facts are. It's just a question of how we frame those in our conditions. And it's a sticky one. I think Doug gave it a really good swing. And I'm hopeful that we can make a little more progress. How much of an adjournment do we need, do you think? Or recess, I should say, not adjournment. My bad.
10 minutes would be plenty of time.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for the reverb. Winter, should I be closing the public hearing about now?
I think that would be a fine idea.
Chair Benjamin, it looks like Commissioner Hernandez has his hand raised. I'm not sure if he has something to say.
Sorry, I'll lower my hand.
Okay, sorry, just want to double check before we move on to the next thing.
You're the best, Bridget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. And we are in recess for 10 minutes. We'll see you in about 10 if that works for you. All right. putting staff.
Amazing how much longer it takes to get some of this work done when we're not all in the same room. So thank you for that. We've reviewed the items with the city attorney and also with the applicant after that, just to clarify some things and make sure that there's good understanding about what might be a commitment with regards to your permit review at this point in time. So the two topics are, first of all, the right to farm and a restriction. First off, the quick research that we did on how the Metuchi PD and subsequent review of single family homes was conducted is actually a really good example. The PUD included a very general condition of approval that required that there would be a deed restriction when the houses came in, that would be the time when the actual restriction would be recorded. But the broad condition language acknowledged that that needed to be done, which was at the time at hand now. And it just didn't go into all the details with the attorney reviewed language. The purpose of the restriction we would recommend would be acknowledged. And we've drafted, Winter's drafted something. I'm gonna ask her while you're discussing things, we're gonna do a little wordsmithing on it because we have talked to the applicant. We want it to be quite general at this point, and then it gets very, very specific. The deed restriction itself is a whole page. It's a lot. There's no way we could produce that for you tonight. The other item on the sound wall, and frankly, we think not only is it the commission's preference, as well as it's always been staff's preference, which is why we've always shown other ways of conforming with the city's adopted general plan noise element, is to not have sound walls for these individual kind of last parcels along Highway 1. And frankly, I think you're just about done with them. There aren't very many left. You've had several recently, and there were quite a few before this that have been able to conform, certainly with the interior sound levels as Doug described. We have talked to our building official about that. We have reviewed HUD sound ratings for standard construction practices and a number of other sources. And our own experience with working with noise consultants, we're not worried about it. The exterior area and carving out an area that can be sound protected is something that the applicant is amenable to and would strive to do. And in this case, the applicant is not interested at all in having a sound wall and would like to accomplish conformance with the noise element in an appropriate site planning and building design approach it the way that we would hope you would be more comfortable. So we think there's a lot of agreement here on how to take this on. It's not perfect. It's a challenging area to have a highway running through town like this, but we know we can work through it if we're very upfront about the area. The advantage, of course, is that these lots are a bit larger, so that makes it a much easier than on some of the other sites that we've been looking at recently. So those were the two items, and we're gonna look at our detailed language for a few minutes if you are continuing your discussion. And I don't see the applicant's hand raised, so I think that means that she's
We'll close the public hearing.
Yeah. Okay.
But while the smithing is going on, let me just throw one more question into the mix, which might have been on the minds of my colleagues as well. I should point out an ex parte communication. I'd made a passing reference to additional history from Mr. Ferreira. He graciously texted me, and I got his permission to read this into the record because I think it's pertinent. The Ocean Colony Sound Wall was decided in 1990 or thereabouts. The losing builder was Bass Homes of Cupertino. Even the Coastal Commission was forced to grant a CDP. At that time, the Santa Cruz office handled Half Moon Bay. Les Sternad was in charge. The noise element was done in response by Chris Guston to avoid repetition. So my grasp, that's the end of his comment. So my grasp is that the original designers of the subdivision had something different in mind than what the builder eventually had in mind. And that led to a sound wall that no one thought was a good idea, which leads me to this question for Winter. Earlier, we said that with respect to the ability to rely on the lot retirement provision, the word of the applicant was sufficient, that made it not vulnerable. If the applicant doesn't want to do a sound wall, perhaps a similar stipulation can be made that would provide us with the same level of assurance that a sound wall would not result.
Yes, and I agree with that, Chair Benjamin, and I'm glad to hear Jill got to speak with the applicant about this condition. And I do, after thinking about it a little bit more, I think the applicant's willingness to agree to the condition, as well as the commission's discussion about the tension between the aesthetic impacts of a potential sound wall and the noise element discussion of a sound wall would make it defensible and acceptable to have a condition that says that acknowledges that the resulting lots would be required to comply with the noise element without the use of a sound wall. And I noticed that condition A7 already had stated the first part of that the resulting lots would have to comply with the noise element. And so I think Jill and I are just wordsmithing how to get the additional language in there that compliance would have to occur without the use of a sound wall. You're muted.
I'm very sorry. So, and I appreciate the efforts, because we do have this policy 2A, I think it is, that we're asking the applicant to say they're not going to do that, and finding a way that's in some future world, a future owner of the parcel says, I want to avail myself of 2A and build that sound wall. That's way beyond my pay grade. So I appreciate your encouragement that there's a way to address that. While we're waiting for that smithing to happen, colleagues, further comments, if any? Do you feel like you want to, I should also ask this, I mean, obviously I've never met an applicant who said, no, let's take more time. Do you feel like time would be a benefit to you to chew on this some more without the pressure of a meeting? Or do you want to try to drive it tonight? It's not 10 o'clock yet, so I don't feel stupid yet. Appearances can be deceiving. But I want to give this the attention and care that it deserves. Thoughts, Commissioner Polgar? You're okay.
I'm fine with, no, it's me. I would prefer to use the wait a little bit, not past tonight, but just give Winter and Jill the time they need right now, and then move forward with this, because I think all the concerns that I've heard and that I had have been addressed. So I don't see a reason. And if it takes some time, then Chair Benjamin, you can, I don't know, maybe you can entertain us for a minute. So, but no, I don't see a reason to hold off or to chew on it further.
Okay, thank you. So any other commissioners have any additional concerns or questions about the project? All right, so my ability to entertain is obviously compromised back to what it always was. And so I think we just need to give you guys the time to focus without feeling like you're working in a fishbowl. Do you want another recess, or do you want us to sit here and tap our fingers on our desks?
We have no preference as long as you don't mind watching us. Or we'll shut off our videos. We're just typing and emailing, and we need a few more minutes. So we're going to send our language to the applicant. And I do think this is worth your while. It's only 9:15. This is a project that would be difficult for us to come back to this year.
Why don't we take a 15-minute
It would help.
recess?
9:30.
Yeah, let's just say 9:30. Like,
All right, we'll get this right. Okay.
But before we do, I just wanted to I got a note from Bridget saying that the applicant wanted to say something. We have closed the public hearing. If it's pertinent to the decision-making and staff thinks that's desirable and the commission has no objection, I'm willing to reopen the public hearing to hear those thoughts. I don't want to act without your support, commission.
Yeah, by all means.
Barring any objections, I'm going to reopen the public hearing. Bridget, can you help us recognize Adrian for another 3 minutes or so?
Yes, Adrian, you're able to speak currently, so go ahead.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Adrian.
It was simply a misunderstanding. I thought you were asking me the question on whether I felt rushed in the meeting, whereas you were actually asking Commissioner Polgar. So it was a misunderstanding.
Well, you can tell us. It's okay.
No, I'm saying, I thought you were asking me if I felt pressured, and the answer would be no.
Okay,
All
very good.
right.
That's perfectly
Thank you.
fine. Thank you. All
Thank
right. Okay, we're closing the public hearing again, and we're
Mhm.
recessing for 15 minutes.
The revised language, and then new condition, right to farm language, which sets up the intent for a future deed restriction to be recorded. We are focusing on the two potential new homes that could result from the subdivision and not on the existing development.
I'm sorry, say the last sentence again. I was reading the text when you spoke. I apologize.
Sure. So this is a subdivision from 1 lot to 3. There is existing development now with, originally it was a home. It had been converted to a church, and it is being converted back to a home, which was approved through a coastal development permit. There never was deed restriction language on that existing development. So we thought this new language should apply to the, this requirement should apply to new homes.
Thank you. And with respect, so I mean, I'm looking, once this is subdivided, there's the potential at some point in the future that the parcel could have a change in zoning district. So I wonder if the word residential is essential to the right to farm ordinance on the first line.
Probably not, but I put that in because we have a residential subdivision in a residential neighborhood where I didn't think the right to farm requirement would be required if they, for example, decided not to proceed and they put a garden in or a shed or something, and it didn't seem.
Yeah, for a garden or a shed, probably not. For an office, I would want it still to be recorded. That's, I'm just trying to figure out what the, this is the challenge with smithing stuff on the fly. And
Yeah,
it may be me.
through the chair.
Yes.
So my concern is, look, the existing applicant is going to receive an economic benefit today if we subdivide these lots. And the right to farm should be applied to all 3 lots, in my view. And we should do it now while the economic benefit of subdivision is being applied, because we have no future recourse. I understand the deed restrictions and lot restrictions, but if the right to farm doesn't conflict with them, is there an issue with just applying this to all 3 properties as part of the subdivision? Because subdivision is considered development under our existing LUP.
Through the chair, I'm happy to take a stab at responding to that.
Thank you. Winter, you're recognized.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point Jill made earlier is really about the nexus of this condition to the change in the approval that they're seeking here. So I would agree with Jill's assessment that the nexus is obvious for the 2 new lots, but here there is an existing residence in a community of other existing residences where they don't have this deed restriction put on their property, and they're not bringing any sort of new residence there. It's an existing structure. So,
Fair enough. I understand the concern, and I withdraw my concern. I accept the reasonableness of the city staff's position. Back to the chair.
Very good. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, I can understand Commissioner Hernandez's thought that it somehow might be a consideration in exchange for the new entitlements, but I also can be comfortable with that part of the language. I do worry about the potential of non-residential development, however. So I'm looking, obviously, if it's just a garden or, I don't know, something that doesn't involve occupancy. It's not something that a right to farm ordinance would come up, I think. It would be hard to imagine them having standing. And again, this is not to suggest that our current applicant has anything in mind but to build residences. If the residents were to build as an office, would this be operative? Mute.
Well, the condition does run with the land, but it does say residential. I would imagine that if there was a change in use, there would also be a discussion around that change in use and a discretionary action on that front as well. But it looks like Jill has some thoughts on this as well.
I think we could expand it a little bit, but I'm struggling here because the office is not an allowed use in this zoning district. So you'd have quite a few things to happen to bring you to that point. That said, it's noted that the residential districts do provide for uses like small family childcare, things like that, home occupation as an ancillary use to single family home. So if we wanted to adjust it to residential or other occupied uses, I think that would be fine.
That would certainly work for me. Thank you. Colleagues, do you have any additional thoughts about the proposed language? I am seeing none. And I'll just ask if this is acceptable to the applicant. Do we know? Not that they have to tell us, we can make a decision without, but do we know?
We do. Hold on, I'm struggling with my.
Adrian, just hold on. She can speak if she.
Yeah, and we reviewed this with her.
Yes,
Public hearing open.
yes.
Let the record show that that yes came from the applicant. Thank you very much, Adrian.
All right.
All right, colleagues, so we have a draft proposal with 2 additional conditions attached to the 2 conditions that were added in the addendum to the report, for a total of 4 additional conditions off of the one that was published in the original staff report. Anybody have any other thoughts? And if not, I think maybe there could be a motion. Hands.
Can I make a motion that we approve with the additional conditions and language developed by staff?
So that's all 4, yes?
Correct.
Thank you.
second
Is
it.
there, seconded by Vice Chair Reddick. Commissioner Hernandez, did you have further discussion?
Nope.
Roll call, please, Bridget.
Commissioner Polgar,
Yes.
Commissioner Holt,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reddick,
Yes.
and Chair Benjamin.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. Yes. Yes, Doug, please.
If I may, it's kind of nitpicky. I just want to clarify in the record that adopting the CEQA document, the initial study, mitigated neg deck, is technically a separate action that you do before you approve the project. And I believe that was your intention. I just want the record to reflect that.
I did not frame the motion as generally as I should have. So maybe the resolution in order would have been first the CEQA document and then the approval. So perhaps the right thing to do, Winter, is unwind it and go back one by one, or can we simply clarify that retrospectively?
I think we can clarify that. I don't know if the maker of the motion would like to clarify that it included first an approval of the mitigated negative declaration, followed by an approval of the resolution.
That was absolutely my intent, and I should have been clear in making the motion that at first we would be adopting the CEQA document and the ISMND, and following that we would be approving the project.
And the seconder?
Exactly, yes.
It should have been obvious to the most casual observer. But thank you very much for forcing us to point out that obvious fact. I appreciate it, Doug. And thank you again for the staff report. And thank you, staff, for a wonderful audible response on this tricky project. With that, we have completed the public hearing section of our meeting. And I've got so many screens open that I'm going to have to guess that the next item on our agenda is the director's report.
Yes, Chair Benjamin, thank you. And I have the same challenge with too many screens and systems, so I'll get there. All right. So you're at the second to the last meeting of your year, your final meeting. We are still on track for December 8th, Carter Park. Staff forwarded the link for the initial study mitigated negative declaration to you last week. It is posted on the city's website on the planning page, and we encourage you to take a look at that. if possible, before the packet will go out next week. But you are familiar with this project. You've had a study session on it. So we hope that this is something that will resonate for you and you will recognize the input that you've already put into it. All right, City Council's next meeting is a week from today. It will be December 1st, and they will be taking up their annual consideration of setting the Measure D allocations for 2021. And we've prepared that report. The math has already come out, and it looks like 66 allocations. This year that we're in now had 69. It dropped because persons per household went up, and we can show you that in the new year and how things are shifting around.
Through the chair, we had 66 Measure D applications that went through.
No. Allocations. This is setting them up for next year.
Got it.
And we can show you how many went through. And I encourage you to take a look at that staff report going. It'll go out probably tomorrow because of the holiday. The council packet will be going out early, I believe. So you can take a look at it. It's got 5 years of building permit and Measure D allocation data very quickly summarized in a chart that I think you'll find interesting.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. On December 16th, I will be having a director session, and we'll be looking at accessory dwelling units. And I think one of them is on Filbert and the other is on Casa del Mar. The Architectural Advisory Committee reviewed the straw flower landscaping upgrade for just a corner of the shopping center, as well as a facade upgrade. This was last week. It was a really favorable review, and it does not require a coastal development permit. There's no expansion of the use. Now, there could become new tenants as a result of this, and in the event that that trips development, then we will look for coastal development permits if they're applicable to tenanting. But the actual improvements do not need that kind of a review. And we are still tentative for the last Architectural Advisory Committee meeting of the year, which would be December 17th. We're looking forward to the application for Main and Kelly, and understand that the architect is on target for that. And happy Thanksgiving.
I think that was the end.
That's it. Yeah.
That was nice punctuation. Thank you. Let's see. A question for me. I think there was an interesting city council meeting last week, and I'm not sure if everybody is plugged into what happened. Maybe everybody is. I don't know if it bears discussion tonight.
I can give an update. Last week, there was a special meeting on the 19th, and council received a presentation from San Mateo County. County is looking to use CARES funding and other funding that they've received for COVID response to purchase hotels and convert them to shelter facilities. They've already done this in Redwood City. They've purchased, or they're in the process of purchasing, 2 hotels. They presented to the community 2 locations. One is the Coastside Inn at just south of Pilarcitos Creek, near the Pilarcitos neighborhood. The address is escaping me. It's near Tres Amigos. And then the other one is the Quality Inn up in the Miramar neighborhood area near Naples Creek. And we understand as of today, and it is public information at this point, that they are not proceeding with the Quality Inn purchase. They're focused on the Coastside Inn, which is the first one I mentioned. Council will receive another update about this on December 1st. So that same meeting where they're looking at Measure D. And we understand also, and this was part of the presentation last week, that the county will be taking this up with the Board of Supervisors on December 8th.
And whereas it's frequently the case that the Planning Commission considers consistency of these kind of things with our local general plan and zoning ordinances, this is not the case for this project. So we will not be seeing this.
Probably not. We're still reviewing. We don't want to get too deep into it at this point, but there are exceptions associated with this funding source.
Okay, so we should be cautious in discussing it. Thank you. Commissioner Hernandez.
So through the chair, also recognizing that this is not an agendized item, it would be great if we could get a fact sheet out to the community about what we can and can't do as a community and what is and isn't being proposed. Sure. This is not a question, this is more of a statement. I will say I've heard numerous people reaching out to me over the last week saying, oh, we're going to create a COVID community or a COVID commune or colony in Half Moon Bay. We're going to ship homeless people to Half Moon Bay. Having spoken to several city council members, I don't think anything could be further from the truth, but it would be great to just get a fact sheet out to the community because there's just a lot of misconceptions being put out there. And, you know, there are people who have a legitimate view that don't want to provide services, but I think that we need to remove the fantasy conspiracy theories and get some facts out in front of the public. It would be really helpful.
We understand, and we really appreciate that input, and we'd appreciate any help that can be done in conveying it. I understand that exactly what you're asking for is being prepared. I think what I should have said when we started this is that we've known about this for less than 2 weeks. So there's a lot that has been learned very, very quickly, but it's hard to develop a fact sheet while you're going that fast. But we are doing it, and we think it's really important. So appreciate that input.
Thank you.
And if I can just also comment, again, it's not agendized, but it seems like at least there's some potential for this to interact with our recent update to the general plan. And I'm assuming that that's something that, I don't know, I shouldn't assume, but there, you know, the Coastal Commission is going to be aware of this. Do you envision that that's a place where any ramifications of this acquisition might appear in our it might be reflected in a revision of the LCP? Or
I think that we don't have enough information, but I can tell you that we have communicated with the Coastal Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the director? All right, then we go on to Planning Commission communications. Colleagues, what would you like to talk about amongst us, just us? I have one item, and I feel a bit sheepish about it, but a couple of weeks ago, you asked me to write a letter. I wrote a letter, and then I thought, okay, if I send this out to staff, they're going to feel very sheepish sending it out. If I send it to you, I might be violating the Brown Act. Or your direction to me was just write a letter. Maybe your direction is sufficient and I can just send it. But not wanting to step out of line here, do you feel, first Planning Commission, are you okay with my just writing the letter and sending it? I'm seeing thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. Commissioner Hernandez, you good?
Sorry, what's the question?
You asked me to write, the commission voted that I write a letter and I've written the letter, but I haven't sent it because I thought I ought to check and see if I needed to give it to you before I sent it. Send it. Okay. Thank you for the delegation. Staff, no problem with my sending it, other than mild embarrassment.
We don't
What
even know.
letter? I don't know what you're talking about.
We don't even know where it's going.
This is a,
It's the letter of the it's the thank you letter for the OUP work that
I know.
she's being funny. She's being very entertaining. So yeah, I was planning to send it to the city council and to the city manager and to the city attorney.
And maybe Biden and Harris. I'm just saying. I don't know.
I'll probably copy you too, but thank you very much again for clarifying that. And I'm sorry not to have gotten it out earlier. Now I feel like I've got what I need. Watch for a letter coming to an email box near you. With that in mind, I have no other planning commissioner communications. So I ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move
I
we
make-
adjourn.
I second.
All right, I think that's by acclamation. I wish you all and all our viewers a very happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Good.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
You too. Happy Thanksgiving.
Be well.